Hi everyone, welcome to JetStream Sessions, powered by Airbridge, the MMP trusted by 500 plus global brands. In this series, we sit down with experts shaping growth across platforms and markets. While there's no shortage of Steam marketing advice tailored for indie games, content built for mid-sized and larger gaming companies is still surprisingly rare. Yet, more mid-sized and mobile-first companies are expanding into the PC and console ecosystem. So for many, the most accessible entry point is definitely Steam. And for these studios and publishers, mastering Steam marketing has become a critical piece of the go-to-market playbook. So today, guests, we have Nikki DePaula, VP of Global Media at Liquid Advertising, the agency behind major PC and Steam marketing companies for leading gaming companies like Nexon, Krafton, Bethesda, Square Enix, Sega, and so many more. So, hi, Nikki.
Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here. It's my third time in Seoul, so not a newcomer to the city, but excited to meet, I think, more with these PC console gaming type companies.
That's great. So it's your already third time visiting Seoul then?
Yeah. Right.
That's good, yeah. You're no longer a tourist then, yeah.
I still feel like one.
Got it. So yeah, I mean, for those who don't know you yet, what's your role in Liquid and what does Liquid specialize in?
Yeah, so I'll start about Liquid. Liquid is a full-service creative and media agency. We specialize in gaming. We've been in the business for over 25 years, or this is our 25th year anniversary, actually. And our biggest break in gaming was working with Blizzard for over a decade. We worked on both the branding and performance side of games like StarCraft, World of Warcraft, Overwatch, Hearthstone. And so that's where we really established our reputation. And quickly grew our business in gaming from there, working on both PC and console titles, and even mobile as well. With this experience, we've really been able to lead clients into the world of cross-platform. As for me, I've been at Liquid for almost 15 years now. I started my job working in the trenches, setting up campaigns, optimizing in platform, and starting to build vendor relationships. And now I oversee several teams working with all sorts of clients, from indies to AAA, and all over the globe. My current daily routine is, definitely more on the strategic side these days, but because I have that background in the performance side and setup, my understanding of, how to help clients achieve their strategic goals and really root that in tactics has been super valuable.
That's really great. A lot of Korean gamers, especially including myself, love StarCraft, Warcraft, WoW by Blizzard. And it's really good to know that you've been working with Blizzard and the agency has been, here for in the industry for 25 years. That's just amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, these are these sort of original PC giants. And it's really exciting to see now other clients coming from the APAC region start to dig their heels into the PC console space.
Yeah, that's great. So let's dive right into today's topic, which is Steam marketing. So I love to start with the launch phase. Because on Steam, pre-launch momentum is everything. A strong wish list count can really make or break visibility at launch. So Nikki, from your experience, what's the realistic wish list target for a mid-sized game to launch successfully and get noticed by the people? And what's the minimum benchmark you would recommend for a strong debut?
Yeah, this is a great conversation, actually. It really reminds me of the early days of app advertising, where there's this push and pull between volume and quality. How do you get to the top of the charts, right? App discovery was, and to an extent still is, a really important part of being associated with the top of the charts, this App Store ranking. On the other hand, PC game discovery you have more options for discovery. It's not all contingent on where you are on the Steam wish list. When they do surveys of gamers, they find that word of mouth, what games your friends are playing, YouTube, influencers, things like this are actually quite influential as well to game discovery. So while it's important to have that visibility in the Steam store, it's not as critical for PC games as it is for mobile apps. Secondly, it's also important to remember that wish lists like when you think about what we're hoping for to getting at the top of the wish list and things like that, that's really just a proxy metric for interest, right? And unqualified wish lists are only going to take you so far. So we've seen instances where clients are super excited about their chart position, and they go into launch thinking everything's going to be great, but then it turns out they didn't have as strong conversion rates as they were hoping for. So the visibility is good, but you can't really, put all your eggs in that basket. And so, I know you're looking for this golden number, similar to how many installs do we need to get to number one on the App Store? Just like to that answer, there's no golden number. However, we can say, a good rule of thumb is that at least 70% of your wish list should come from non-incentivized sources. And then within your top priority region. So that's also critical too. When you look at the breakdown of percentages of where your wish lists are coming from, is it from the geos that you really care about? And then interestingly, I'm sure you guys have noticed this too, but once a few other games launch on Steam, ones that were ranked 2, 4, 5, once they've launched, they leave that wish list category, right? Where they kind of fall off the unreleased game. So then your ranking moves up. And actually we find that to be an influential factor as well.
That makes perfect sense. So I didn't even know that there's even a incentivized wish list advertising products.
I think there's just like with app installs, people are now looking for more ways to get incentivized this or that to try to game the system essentially. And gaming the system, as we mentioned, just it's only going to get you so far. So if you think about it in that way, that wish lists are a proxy for interest. Really, what your campaigns are supposed to be about are generating interest, not necessarily driving a cost per wish list.
Truly. So do you think that Steam, we don't know because we're outside of Steam, but do you think from your experience that Steam also not only just values the number of this wish list, but also the quality of the wish list, as well as the the country breakdown and all these the other factors?
Yeah, I think that's important. Steam doesn't necessarily want a bunch of bots either, right? They want to make sure that these are gamers who are actually looking at that. I think. Remember when Apple changed kind of the algorithm with how things chart? I can imagine Steam also tweaking that in the future if, problems start to occur.
Yeah, truly. So definitely just summarize some of the tips that you gave out. First, 70% of your wish list should be coming from non-incentivized sources or the offerings. And second, definitely you need to understand where your audience is coming from, and actually those targeted countries, you should bring the wish list from those countries in a balanced manner.
Exactly.
Got it. That makes perfect sense. So let's say we've set a wish list goal. Let's just say it's either 50,000 or 100,000 with some of the considerations that Nikki just recommended to us. Now the big question is, how do we even get there? It's not easy. So what are the must-have strategies that every studio should have in place to set themselves up for a successful Steam launch? So I'm talking about the full stack here, from Steam page setup and asset optimization, to paid marketing campaigns, community building, brand marketing, and even streamer collaborations.
Yeah. All of those things. But, piggybacking off of what we just discussed, it's less about how do we get to this golden number necessarily versus how do we get consumers excited about this game? How do we get it so that they're excited to wish list? And that's where you're going to see your quality come from. Yes, you're totally spot on with the full stack that you mentioned. Other things that could be more helpful or maybe more specific, because this is about generating excitement. I think this is where a good community and word of mouth strategy could come into play. Is there a plan to build exciting assets? What's your PR plan? Which kind of creators are you going to work with to really hype it up? How are you generating new content to get people really into it? I think PR definitely deserves its own special bullet too, because I think we definitely see that a lot of excitement and hype can be created by people writing articles and really kind of getting behind your back and shifting that momentum for you. I think it's something that APAC clients have not necessarily mastered yet, so I would put that at the top of the list. flighting strategy when you are developing content, figuring out when to release it, which shows to align with, which launches to kind of stay out of the way too. And then in Western markets in particular, it is important to have multiple touch points. Like you're not going to be able to reach your Steam wish list goal or generate excitement if you're just doing Instagram and feed ads. That's not really going to be the buzz driver that you're looking for. Other tools to help you get more precise, making sure you're collecting first party data. You can start to do brand studies kind of early on, before launch, just to measure your hype. And any other sort of like social sentiment or buzz measurement tools.
Wow, I mean, compared to mobile marketing, it sounds like it's more complicated, and it's kind of a mixture of everything.
Exactly.
And you mentioned the multi-touch point. Can you elaborate just a little bit more on that part?
Yeah, I think, one key difference between mobile marketing, PC console marketing is that, mobile marketing, you show somebody a few ads about this game, some playable ads, show them what it's like, real or not. Most consumers know that that's a very low barrier to entry. It's usually a free download. Download, try it out, if it's sticky or not, and then you move on, right? It's easy to optimize towards that because there's plenty of attribution companies for that. But then on the other hand, with PC console, even with a free-to-play game, you have to understand that core gamers, are going to be investing time in that, and maybe money, ideally money, and even premium games. Those prices are rising now. It's $60 now, it's $80, right? So, you really have to pull consumers away from either the game they're currently playing or give them a reason to invest their time and money into something completely new.
Got it. So definitely, it really sounds like multi-touch and a multifaceted approach, layered approach is really essential for PC console marketing.
Yeah, I actually didn't get back to your point on that, but yes, exactly. You kind of led me right there where because it's a more complicated consumer decision, you do need to reach your audience in a variety of ways, a variety of touch points, a variety of media channels to explain and really convince them and persuade them, why this is exciting.
That makes perfect sense. So like paid online media execution, media planning is kind of like the basic part of it. And then it's not even just online, you put an offline piece, you put PR, you put community, word of mouth, reviews, and you actually have to make this kind of a holistic strategy to make it happen for you.
Exactly, and I think that's something that, coming from other backgrounds, maybe there's a little discomfort with that because that requires a lot more lead time and a lot more planning ahead. When you start to condense these timelines, that's when things get really rushed and, you start to realize, oh man, how do I get this big streamer in like 2 weeks? What's their schedule like? Does press have time for me to do these interviews? So the work back calendars can get a little more complicated.
Makes total sense to me. So it really sounds like the opposite of how all these hyper casual gaming companies are doing things. Right now.
Exactly.
Yeah, makes sense. So let's just say that we have equipped ourselves with the right strategy, like full funnel marketing strategy. And then let's just say what happens after the launch. Once the game is live, which Steam categories should developers really aim to go in? New and trending or popular new releases? What are the ones that actually move the needles in terms of visibility and sales?
So yeah, you're right. After you have your kind of fully customized strategy and your plan to media and et cetera, which by the way, definitely should differ by game, genre, audiences you're trying to reach, all that fun stuff. I would say after that, there's a few commonalities to call out. So one, and this is something we have to do often because believe it or not, we don't always work on games that are getting 90 and above on Metacritic. There are some times when we're working on games that fall a little bit short of expectations, and that's okay, right? But you have to have a plan in place for that. If you are anticipating, maybe some mixed reviews, the games might be a little bit buggy or worse. How do you make the most out of a suboptimal situation? That's where having a really solid measurement partner like Airbridge or something else that can really track these installs can be very handy. We've definitely saved clients a lot of money by figuring out, okay, this region not doing well. Like, let's cut it. Let's just focus on, France or Mexico or wherever. So optimizing in a worst case scenario is really critical. And making sure that measurement is installed ahead of time, obviously, is also critical. And then getting your team in place to be able to make those changes and being able to have those relationships with partners where you can explain what's going on. And then lastly, I think mobile clients tend to be pretty good about this, but don't undervalue the power of your own CRM, your own first-party data, things that require logins, that sort of thing. That's really critical for optimizing the rest of the campaign as well, building lookalikes, remarketing lists, tracking LTV, et cetera.
Makes sense. So definitely, I believe like most of the times, like people don't want to face the realities. Sometimes the realities are harsh, but definitely if you have the backup plan, the plan B from the beginning, even if things go a little bit less than we expect, you can still deal with it.
I think like the thing is like don't panic. Don't panic and say stop everything. There might still be glimmers of hope. There might still be ways to figure things out. And the earlier we know that, the better, because some media can be hard to shift or hard to cancel, or maybe we're still in a cancelable window or something like that. The earlier that you can be honest about where your game's at and where it's coming in at, the better.
Got it. And that's the reason why like measuring things all the time in from many different angles is important. Just to like pick up those like early signals that something could go wrong, you should be prepared for that.
And I think not just like a standard measurement tool that we've kind of been discussing, whether it's an MMP or a third-party study, but also, I think maybe something mobile marketers are not as experienced with are doing things like focus group testing or mock reviews. So mock reviews can be really important for identifying, first of all, any key USPs you want to highlight, as well as things to avoid talking about, in your marketing messaging, but also kind of gives you a sense of, okay, this is where the game's going to land. So maybe we need to front load the media in this campaign and get people excited about it and buying on day one versus post launch when the reviews are going to be not so hot.
Okay. I mean, I've heard about the focus group interviews, but mock reviews I haven't heard about it. Like, can you care to explain more?
Well, we don't do mock interviews, so I can't, or sorry, not mock interviews, mock reviews. So I can't really discuss exactly what happens, but the basis of it is that you hire a company, or you can do it internally as well. Somebody plays through the game and basically guesses where it's going to land based off of, how it compares to competitors, for instance. So then you have an idea of how it might do.
Makes sense. So Nikki, I mean, as you mentioned earlier, we're now seeing a shift like towards a more balanced mix of performance marketing and brand-driven strategies. So PC and console Steam titles like marketing is no longer just about maybe hype and FOMO, like driven by cinematic trailers, community buzz, streamer collabs, and big brand moments. And vice versa, it's just not like solely driven by direct response style like performance marketing either. So do you think this kind of shift towards a more balanced approach is real? And if so, what's driving the change in how studios and publishers are marketing their games today?
Man, there's so many. I feel like there's so many answers this could be, but here's like from my experience and my take, what it might be. So yes, absolutely. I think this trend is real. And honestly, it's just a return to basic advertising fundamentals. I think like some of the biggest, the most insightful conversations I'll have with some clients or other people in marketing is like, how did marketing work before we were able to track everything? There was still a science to it of human psychology, right? But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think what's happening is the convergence of these two different types of marketers, right? And I think it's happening right now in places like Korea, where you have people who come from mobile backgrounds. They're used to tracking everything. They've had that luxury for years, and all of a sudden they enter maybe the PC console space, and it feels like it's like taken away, and that's hence the role of companies like Airbridge kind of coming in and saying, no, we can do that too.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, those marketers, they come from these more core analytical backgrounds, and maybe to them, mobile marketing is mostly about data analytics. Then you have the other side, which is maybe more associated with these older gaming companies who have been established, and they were doing just fine for marketing for years without tracking. And maybe they were more reliant on brand marketing, creating that FOMO, creating hype, amazing trailers, et cetera. And they're starting to be held more accountable for like ROI, basically, on their marketing budgets. And when you mix these two together, I think it can be sometimes a contentious thing, but honestly, it's for the good of the industry to mix these two together. You take the best of both worlds, you get the branding. I think you can really improve your performance marketing with a lot of branding tactics, and vice versa. You can improve the brand marketing with performance tactics. So yeah, I think both sides can definitely learn from each other.
Yeah, I definitely agree with your point of view that you need to take just best out of these two worlds, and you really make these two worlds reconcile.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not easy, but you're right that because the market is getting more competitive, you cannot really survive with just one tool approach. You need to have both of these two.
I think with the brand marketers, there's they look at their expense sheet. They're already spending so much on all these various things, like these hot new trailers and things like that, and then to see a line item for tracking, it seems a little scary. But it's definitely worthwhile.
And I know that liquid advertising is really well known for your media planning and media strategies, and definitely like a very tailored media execution part for the North American market. And I just want to ask you, what are the major differences, of PC console Steam marketing, performance marketing compared to mobile performance marketing?
Oh yeah, there's quite a few, I think, and these all get exposed when we meet clients with mobile backgrounds, and that we can see where their expectations are. So one is, I think patience is a really big one. Results in PC console can be less immediate, and that's because these audiences, as we mentioned earlier, require more exposure to convert. It's not just going to be see an ad or see a couple ads and you're sold. It takes multiple explanations of what this game is, hearing about it from your friends, seeing an article about it on IGN and whatnot. I think a lot of people coming from mobile backgrounds are shocked by the cost pers, particularly cost per acquisition or cost per install or cost per gameplay. I think they're maybe used to where the mobile tolerances are, and then they see, oh wow, for a $60 game, it's a lot different, or for a free-to-play game even. It can be a lot different, especially in a very competitive genre. And then I think there is more of a trust with PC console marketers in these kind of marketing and advertising core principles, primarily full funnel marketing. I think when we chat with mobile app companies, the understanding of the full funnel is a little different. They start from the bottom of the funnel, and when they can't scale anymore, that's when they start to look at the upper funnel tactics versus looking at it as a whole from the get-go. So yeah, that's why it's going to result in a different media mix. Our media mixes for PC console games are definitely built with that full funnel in mind and that consumer journey. We ask ourselves questions like, where is this conversation happening about this game? How can we be there? Where can we reach gamers when they're actually in the mood for game discovery? Context really matters, I would say, in that case. And then something that mobile app marketers don't tend to think about that's important for positioning your product as more premium is putting ads in places that isn't what we call a made for advertising site, which is you go to a site on your mobile phone or desktop, and it's just ads refreshing constantly. It's like a terrible experience, So I think understanding that there's a difference between where you want your ad to be and adjacency compared to, maybe there's a higher tolerance for that sort of thing in mobile app advertising.
I see. So the patience and definitely difference of the media mix itself. And in terms of like even placements and the type, formats of these ads should be different. So a lot of like not just subtle, but some of the big differences, also I would say lie in the PC console Steam marketing compared to mobile marketing.
Yeah, for sure. I think people care a little bit more about the look of your brand and how your brand appears.
Oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense. So Nikki, since you mentioned media mix as one of the main differences, I think what marketers would be eager to understand what are the top 3 channels you believe studios must consider for Steam and PC, marketing today. Like everyone likes top 3, and like if a team has a budget to maybe go beyond the basics of these top 3 channels, which new or underrated channels are showing strong potential for user acquisition for Steam games right now?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think everybody knows the basics. Everybody knows, your most common websites and, your Metas and Googles of the world. But I think what's really underutilized by especially clients who aren't based in the US or in the West, you might not, understand the nuances, for instance, of community media. And what do I mean by that? I mean places where your audiences are gathering, talking about their little fandoms. So whether that's, a Discord or a Reddit, I think people know about these platforms, but I don't know if they're really figuring out the best ways to be part of that conversation. And it's not necessarily as a simple thing as, just do a promoted post here or promoted post there. It's about creating the conversation and what's the content strategy going to be like on these platforms. So that's one. Number 2, I would call kind of like these high-touch programmatic campaigns where there's more of a strategy behind what you're doing kind of at the upper funnel, your mid-funnel, your low funnel, and how you're creating a plan of frequency to reach users programmatically. And then number 3, I would say OTT and CTV. I think this one, based off of my recent conversations with clients in APAC, it seems to be maybe a bias based off of their experiences in their own region, which I totally understand, right? If CTV is not super popular in your home country, or it was never popular, or cord cutting was never a thing, I can understand why it doesn't really quite resonate. But actually in the US, there are a lot of OEMs that have huge market share, like Samsung, LG, Vizio even has a decent percentage. That have advertising opportunities and plenty of data about who is playing what on their TVs. And so I think when you think about it from that opportunity, that's, I think, worth considering. And I also think maybe there's a bias, not just because of, we don't have that here or not as popular here, but I think maybe there's like a certain distrust with the current measurement solutions that they had for mobile gaming, and maybe that wasn't like quite there. But actually on the console side, the measurement is there because these TVs can detect what is being played on them, so quite certainly if they played a game post ad exposure.
Okay, I mean, this is really practical and helpful. So you mentioned 3 types of underrated channels. Of course, you mentioned like Google Meta and TikTok and these like bigger ones. Yes, you need to use them. But on top of them, you need to consider like 3 types of channels, like community media channels and some programmatic buying methodologies. And also lastly, the OTT streaming and CTV. So it seems like you really highlighted the importance of the CTV and streaming channels. And can you actually elaborate more on this? Like what are the like examples of these channels and how does it actually work? Like if let's just suppose that if one gaming company having like a AAA game wanting to work with Liquid, like how would you help them with streaming ads or TV ads?
Well, we'd first want to understand your audience. I think that any media plan or strategy, we want to understand who you're going after, and are they even found in high numbers on some of the streaming programs out there, and or do these streaming companies even have the level of targeting that you're looking for? I think companies get really excited about working with Netflix or Hulu or Disney Plus, right? But we want to make sure, we want to take a calibrated approach where maybe we look at the audience and say, ooh, I'm not sure, because maybe this game, the audience is more interested in anime, and maybe these streaming platforms don't have anime targeting, despite having a ton of anime on the platform. So these are things we would want to consider when chatting with our clients about, what is the best fit, and what is an alternative solution. Like if you can't run Netflix Direct, what are some other options to reach the same audience on your TV?
I mean, that's great. I mean, I totally agree with you that if you're just like launching a medieval, like kind of a background like game, easily you can, like pick those like series that are like pretty in a medieval like setting, and then you may just want to target them on these media channels, right?
There's actually, I was chatting with a vendor the other day where they have ads on CTV that can target by a moment that pops up in a TV show. So let's say a character on the TV show or movie walks into a convenience store and you're, a chip brand or something. You can have your ad triggered during that moment. So the adjacency is very interesting, because maybe your consumer sees the convenience store on TV and thinks to themselves, oh yeah, like snacks. And then up pops an ad for chips.
Basics, like TPO all the time.
Yeah.
And I think like definitely, the audience who's listening to this podcast should definitely consider like CTV, and like we know that Liquid has been a mastermind behind all of these many like CTV campaigns. So it's definitely, this is a very practical recommendation. And maybe I want to actually move on to a little bit of a different topic about creatives. What kind of creatives work best when performances to go, like for a PC console game? Do you have any examples?
Yeah, I think one thing that is often missing from companies who want to get into the PC console, maybe from an app experience, is these high quality visual assets, so high quality key visual assets that really communicate a brand and what your positioning is. Are you the top tier, let's say medieval game, RPG right now? What are some really high quality assets that put you in that space? I think there can be obviously a knee-jerk reaction to say, hey, let's just test as many assets as possible and see what works, and that's definitely the mobile method. But in this case, you really need to communicate like, no, listen, we're the number one in this category, not like everybody else, essentially. Secondly, of course, you can do creative testing, and we highly encourage creative testing with our client. But the way that we would approach it might be a little different, which is we would like to create messages that feel very tailored to an audience based off of, let's say, a game USP. And that's the thing with like a lot of these PC console games, is that there might be multiple reasons to play and different to attract the most users or the most people to purchase or play. You need to appeal to a variety of their preferences. So you might play this shooter because it has customizable characters, or you can really customize your loadout or something like this. You might want to highlight that in your asset and test that with that type of audience compared to maybe it's the variety of weapons or something else. So highlighting features and segmenting your audiences and being able to test like that is also really important. And then lastly, I think this one's very underrated. Sometimes it's really difficult to tell like what the game is from the assets.
That's true.
And especially there's so many genres out there now. You can't just be a shooter game. It's like, no, are you a hero shooter? Are you an extraction shooter? Are you a survival horror shooter? You really need to have this clear communication of what your genre is and what are these USPs, because sometimes that can be really difficult to tell. And I know I mentioned this in my first bullet about key art. Sometimes key art isn't great at communicating what this game is either. So that's where the testing does come into play. But you do need to have these kind of strong visuals, clear communication of what this game is about.
Wow, I mean, you actually almost cover all the fundamentals about creatives. Like, definitely you should think about the audience, your USPs, and also need to tailor your creatives to each audience, like their preference or their characteristics or maybe their inclination. So even just one game can have so many aspects, and then you can all like make them into different variations of creatives and test them out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think this is really important for games that want to broaden their audience and not stay in their niche. And that, again, this kind of goes back to an earlier conversation point we had about like this stuff takes time. You can't just try to bang out all these creatives in like a month, before launch.
Yeah. That's true. Like even for RPG games, sometimes like people just want adventure. Sometimes people, like just controlling, the fights themselves, and everyone has their own different.
Or
tastes,
if you're trying to get into a different tier of audience, like let's say your ambitions are like to be truly AAA. At that point, it's kind of less about these like really specific features that are maybe only important to core gamers, and it's about communicating a vibe, right? Like something that a broad AAA gamer might relate to, like, oh, this is GTA-like. Like, how do you communicate that in an asset? So it varies, but it's something that you need to think about well ahead of time.
So Nikki, I just want to ask you about this, recent trend that I'm spotting, the cross-platform. So recently, I've seen more gaming companies embracing cross-platform strategies, like launching their games on mobile, Steam, and even HTML5 or web, like all at the same time or gradually. So do you think this multi-platform approach works? And if so, like how should marketers like deal with this, complexities? Like they should coordinate UA and retention across platforms. And user behaviors must be different, like creative strategies must be different. So what do you think about this trend? And how should marketers cope with this?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to think of an example where a game completely failed because it was cross-platform. So I think this is a good thing. Even when games have staggered releases, sometimes it can help give that game a second wind. Came out on PlayStation first, Xbox later, that sort of thing. That said, I understand why it happens too, right? Because if you want to do well globally, it's really helpful to be able to appeal to these various markets that might have different sensibilities. Some markets are very mobile focused, and if you can play that game on mobile, great. And then others, PC, etc. That said, it is important to understand, at least for the Western markets, at least in the US, Western Europe, the mobile gamer and the web gamer and the PC gamer are quite different from APAC. Core gamers on mobile are still quite a niche category in the US. Console ownership for Xbox and PlayStation is pretty good, so is PC. But at this moment, it's just that's not what people think of when they think of a core gamer. They're not thinking of the person who's playing a core shooter or something on their mobile device, and that's just not a big audience. So that could impact the positioning of your game and how you market that type of game in the US. If you are really trying to appeal broadly to, let's say, a core shooter fan in the US, and it is cross-platform, I think putting, for instance, the App Store logos, if you make that the most prominent logo, that might appear to be a different type of game to the Western consumer, where they think, oh, this is like a mobile game. There's like little pause there versus, oh, this is the game that I play on my PlayStation with my bros. So it's a little bit different. And so I think that's how you want to figure out, okay, well, if we do still want to get some mobile players, what kind of segmentation do we need to do? What kind of, does the messaging differ? Or do you keep it very neutral and just let the consumer figure it out? So I think there's a few different, strategies that you could deploy there.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Like cross-platform strategy itself, we can't just judge it as good or bad, but how you deal with it, of course, should be very realistically tailored to each market and the segment of the users. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So, throughout this, podcast, you've been emphasizing the importance of the measurement and full funnel marketing and measurement altogether. And maybe, I'm coming from the MMP background, and I definitely endorse like last touch all the time, but I understand some of the realistic limitations to it. So last touch point attribution has been a reliable starting point for many game marketers. But like as studios grow and expand into new markets, how can this kind of like full funnel measurement or more advanced measurement can come into play in the picture.
So, at the end of the day, very few people are seeing, at one time on Instagram and converting right away. It takes building that frequency, building that familiarity with the consumer and giving them, right messaging at the right time. What do you tell a consumer who is seeing this for the first time versus what are you telling a consumer who is, maybe this is their 5th time seeing their brand? And how are you connecting that and driving them towards purchase or install? So if you only rely on the last touch attribution, you could be potentially missing out on all the other media formats that you could be using to reach this customer, whether it's linear TV, out of home, even console media, which are not all connected in the same ecosystem. That really puts you in danger of, first of all, limiting your channels. And if you're limiting your channels because you think, well, it's not measurable, so why bother? Then you're missing out on the opportunity to reach your audiences in more places. And so ultimately that leads to, a not optimal consumer experience.
Makes sense. So definitely like having MMP or last touch could be one of your basic steps to measurement, but eventually you'll need to consider that it's essentially the multi-touch user journeys that you'll be facing, and also measuring, different media or placements with different characteristics. You need more advanced measurement solutions out
Exactly,
there.
and it's trying to figure out how much influence or impact does media format A have versus B, and are you really attributing the proper credit to a channel that may have more influence?
Truly, I mean, I think that look at you also must have a rich experience using various tools to measure various KPIs for sure. And I agree with you because you actually mentioned that for example the takeover on one website versus just a standard a small banner on that website. Although it's actually all same measured as the same one view,
right?
From typical analytics perspective, in reality, the weight of these two touch points are just completely different.
Exactly. There are 2 terms that are being thrown around to describe this right now. There's one called kind of your attention unit, and so that refers to basically assigning a score to how impactful this unit might be. So that's one thing that you can think of in that sort of comparison. And then also reevaluating how you even look at a CPM. So I think sometimes for people coming from performance backgrounds, they want to compare units just solely based on their CPM and not even taking into account that maybe this CPM might be more expensive because it's more impactful, because it carries more weight with it and can influence the consumer a little bit better. So sometimes it's not just about looking at the cost, but why would this cost be that much higher?
Okay, yeah. So thanks for answering that. And maybe before wrapping up, I just want to ask you just a couple more questions. As Wicked, the company is well known for helping non-US studios succeed in the Western market, and especially on Steam, PC, and console. You've worked with countless publishers from APAC and beyond. So for studios and publishers launching their games in the US for the first time, what's the single biggest pitfall that they should avoid? And on the flip side, what are the few practical, high-impact tips you offer for localizing, effectively building the right media mix, and avoiding common missteps? And I'm representing some of these APAC publishers that I talk with, and they all wanted to, get the answer to this question.
I mean, there's so many things to discuss here. This is a great question, and it's something that, hopefully we can answer a lot of people's concerns.
Hope so, yeah.
I think one thing that we tend to see is kind of copycat behavior. I think there's this culture of not taking that many risks. They want to do exactly what somebody else did. And I think this is a big disservice to your game because your game is unique. It's not supposed to be like every other game. So you really shouldn't expect that copying somebody's playbook will have the exact same results. I think it's totally normal to take inspiration from other campaigns, but you should be inspired by the results and how they got those results, not by doing exactly what they did. So I think that's one thing to consider. Secondly, I think there's like a big shock factor with a lot of APAC clients in terms of how much they have to spend.
Oh, yeah.
At the end of the day, most of our overseas clients are really surprised when we show them using our competitive spend tools how much their competitors are spending in the US markets, and they say, yeah, we only are going to do 10% of that and expect the same results. Now, of course, many games, I think we discussed this at one point, but your success isn't always tied to your marketing budget, right? There are various games that have great PR strategies, didn't have to spend that much, et cetera. But at the end of the day, those are the exceptions, not the rule. So yeah, I think there's a hesitancy to spend, and there's a hesitancy also to spend early when, in fact, sometimes part of your strategy should be to create a lot of hype and momentum going into launch. Why is it so expensive? Why is so much budget required? That segues into point number 3, which is that the US is just simply a huge, fragmented and diverse market. Some markets may only have 1 to 2 top streaming services. The US has like 8.
Oh yeah, it's true.
There's always a new trend happening that could be impacting your creative, your messaging, and even media mix. Be Real was like really hot for like a year or 2, right? So being on top of that and not being kind of late to these games is also important. And then honestly, culturally, it's really important too, and that impacts I think some of our clients' hesitancies to align with, say, sports moments. Overseas, I think the only sports moment that's known is the Super Bowl, right? Yeah. But that's, first of all, not the best play for every game out there. But you know what? There's plenty of other sports tentpole moments to align with or integrations to consider. WWE is a really a big one that it indexes really well with JRPG gamers, right? And like the research shows that there's a big overlap there. But you try to explain WWE to a client from a different country, and they're like, I've never heard of this, gonna pass. Right, and so that they're missing out on these types of opportunities. I will say it's definitely not always about spending the most to win. That's not the message I'm trying to communicate here. It's about spending wisely, finding these audiences, figuring out what are the subcultures in the country. And again, that's where these multi-touch point campaigns are really important.
Truly, I mean, you were recommending to spend more because to make an impact, not really just to spend more. So. Definitely, like sometimes, like as you mentioned, like APAC publishers, they're very data centric, ROI focused, and sometimes like a little bit risk averse. I have to admit that. But you're actually, some of the suggestions that you made could be very useful to them.
Yeah. And then in terms of other hot takes on some missteps here. The sphere comes up way more often in conversations than I hope to hear. In case you're unaware, the sphere is like that unit in Las Vegas.
Oh yeah, in Las Vegas.
Yeah. So that one comes up like way too many times. In the US, nobody thinks about the sphere. Like nobody cares about it.
Okay.
Yeah. I think people are hoping to create like a viral moment or something, but that's actually a great example of you should have done it first. You can't be like the 8th gaming company to do the sphere, because that's just nobody cares about it at that point. So that's 2 lessons in one on that. And then paid advertorial, people buying articles and things like that. Not super common that Western companies are doing, but I know APAC clients are really into it. I think the lesson in that one is that they view it as a replacement, I think, for a PR strategy. So I think the lesson there is develop your PR strategy and don't skimp on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really one good take. Yeah. Thank you. So Nikki, I mean, really appreciate sharing all of these insights. And maybe as a last question, can you share any successful case studies that you're proud of, one that any marketer might learn from?
Yeah. I mean, I think we just talked about big budgets and things like that, but I think you learn a lot of your lessons with the smaller budgets in the indies. So, I'll tell a story about an indie game we worked on called Squirrel with a Gun. That was particular. I know it's fun. Look it up on Steam. It's a great it's exactly what it sounds like. So that campaign was particularly... There's shooting elements.
Okay, got it. Go on.
I would say it's more of like a sim plus shooter. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, what I liked about working on this title was that the client really recognized that, listen, we're not going to win consumers over by just doing takeovers on IGN and all these websites, or even these kind of high budget executions. At the end of the day, this game is about leaning into its brand identity, which is that it's quirky, it's silly, it's fun. So how can we amplify that? How do we take advantage of people just thinking this is like a silly, goofy, fun game? So we ended up doing a lot of executions that felt organic. We worked with like meme accounts on Instagram. So again, this is not Instagram ads. This is partnering with several accounts that are famous for making custom memes that are followed by millions of people and creating content around the game. We worked with several Discord servers and put contests into these servers. And again, these were like meme accounts or meme servers, or these kind of like, funny internet culture type servers, and just engaging communities. So instead of this, top-down approach where we make this look like a big budget game, we actually took the opposite approach and engaged the community, creating shareable content, etc. But then, of course, we can't forget, we also did lower funnel tactics, right? But that's more focused on remarketing, re-engagement, and things like that, creating another touch point for our user to convert.
Again, like brand and performance in one harmony.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So I think we actually cover a lot of things today. So some of my best takeaways, definitely Nikki, you emphasized the well-balanced approach between the performance marketing and the brand strategies. And also you talked about multi like touch point nature of the user journeys for PC console gamers. And also you talked about some of the difference between the mobile marketing and the PC console marketing. You need to be more patient. It's kind of a long term. You need to be better prepared with some of these backup plans if things don't go well. So a lot of these great takeaways. I really appreciate your time today. And I think these are the kinds of real world strategies that can help game marketers, especially in APAC and non-US marketers, rethink how to go global and especially enter the US market. So please be sure to check out Liquid Advertising and Airbridge, and we're going to definitely put those links or the emails that you can use to reach out to both of us, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.